Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and today I'm joined by yet a different brother from a different mother. We affectionately call him the Professor, Zach Metkler. Zach, how's it going?
Oh, another day in paradise, Joe. I can't really complain at this point.
Another day in paradise. For anyone who's ever listened to Dave Ramsey, I don't know if you've ever caught some of his stuff. It's been a while for me, but he's like a financial guru. I think he always says, when people ask him that, he says, better than I deserve. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of powerful.
I do like that a lot.
I do too, but then it makes me feel like bad. Like, some days you put on your happy face. Some people are like the morning people, you know what I mean? They're always like, good morning. And I've always felt like, what's so good about it? And, one time my uncle said something to the effect of, well, you're alive. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't know if I wasn't. I don't think. I really don't know how any of that works, and nor does anybody. So, you know what I mean? All we could do is you could have faith or you could guess. There's the two ways of going about that, I guess. So I've always, you get a server at a restaurant and they're like, oh, how you doing? And sometimes I like to mess with the servers. It's like, what would you like to eat? And I try and order something that's not on the menu. But when they ask how your day is, and I'm like, terrible, it kind of throws them for a loop because I think they're having a pretty bad day. But then it's almost like it kind of readjusts them maybe. But we're always ones for small talk. We got some XFL stuff to say, to talk about today, and some former Steelers that are involved in that. But I got one other thing I got to bring up real quick. It just popped into my brain. I don't know about you, but if I ever deal with a server that doesn't write something down, I almost feel like this is like a Seinfeld thing or a Curb Your Enthusiasm for people who've followed those shows that Larry David's been involved in. Like if they don't write down your order, it makes me very nervous, especially I'm always going out. I'm with the wife and the kids, so it's a family of three, and I'm a picky eater, so it's like, you can't screw this up. If you screw this up, that's it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to want to come back here. Or I'm not going to want to leave you a tip or, anything like that. Now, if you write it down, and I'm assuming you wrote it down properly and it comes out wrong, then you can at least blame the cook. You know what I mean? Does it ever make you nervous? Do you notice that at all?
Oh, yeah. I do the same thing. I'm very much a stickler whenever my order's not right, or I see a situation where the waiter or waitress had a very clear chance to write it down in some capacity, comes back and it's not even remotely close to what I ordered. I have a tendency to get a little more frustrated. I try to keep my cool and politely tell them that's not what I wanted, because I'm not necessarily a picky eater, but there are things that I'm getting a order-specific meal, and there's things that come on the meal that I don't want because I don't like that thing. It's easy as taking it off, but sometimes I just feel like in my mind that's the easy part of it, is just writing down what I want and taking it there. And I'm not going to criticize food service people because I know it's a difficult job at times, but to make it easier on yourself, sometimes writing it down so you don't forget things, especially if you have multiple tables with multiple people at each table. And like you said, in your situation where you have a wife, a kid, and all that stuff there, it becomes a lot. And if the people and the waiters and waitresses that can do extraordinarily well with that and can remember everything to a T, I give them all the credit in the world, because my memory doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I do get nervous sometimes when I see that stuff go on there, because I like my order to be right. And typically when it's right, there's a nice tip that comes along with it, and I go about my business. I go about my day.
I mean, Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin, these guys, they have like a little notepad. You always see them writing them. Kyle Shanahan, yeah. They're like a little flip notepad, and they write things down. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I guess, that's probably why they're in a position where they're at, and, making the big bucks. And, just one other small part about all of this, you talk about screwing up orders. I went out of town for a wedding like 2 weeks ago, and that's why, you were filling in as you are for Brian this time, and we're giving him a little bit of a break. You were filling in for me, and on a couple of these shows, and it just so happened that you must know this. It's like the old Joe Pesci Lethal Weapon thing, where they always, I'm not going to say the full word, but they screw you in the drive-through, and we get some McDonald's, which I guess that's my first mistake. We ordered there was like 2 for $3 McDoubles, and the very word itself should tip you off as to what it is, and it's not a double cheeseburger because they only have a single slice of cheese on it, right? And so it's a double cheeseburger if it has 2 slices of cheese with 2 patties. So the McDouble is in order to, I don't know, shave off 15 cents or whatever it is and offer it as a lower cost to their customers. It's a single slice of cheese with 2 patties. So it's a McDouble. Well, I got a cheeseburger. Actually, we got 2 just cheeseburgers. There was no double patties on them. I was severely disappointed. And, complaining is like yelling at the wall or whatever. But I digress. It seems like there's a little bit of demand for some XFL stuff out there. For the people who know, it's actually not the defunct league it once was back in 2001. It is returning. It kicks off this upcoming weekend with 4 games. It's an 8-team league, so that means there's 4 games every weekend. And the way it's devised is that these games aren't going to be like on some obscure CBS sports network like the AAF, which I actually did like, the Alliance of American Football. But it's another one of those things where you had a minor league kind of sorta, because the NFL has no development league. But a lot of those players did end up showing up on NFL rosters this upcoming season after it folded. And I know a lot of people get worried about they investing their time or whatever money into another league that could disappear. Well, it seems like there's a lot of money put behind this by one of the original guys behind the XFL back in 2001, obviously, WWE mogul Vince McMahon. And he's behind this, and they're very invested in this. And I believe this all came about because there was a ESPN 30 for 30 special, and they interviewed him. And I think Dick Ebersol was one of the NBC guys that were involved, and it was a big to-do, new league. It's going to play, after the NFL season. Or I don't even know. Was it after the NFL season, the last one? I think it was.
I believe it was, yeah.
Or in the summer or something of that nature. But they realize you can't go head-to-head like the USFL attempted to do. That's what doomed the USFL in. And a lot of people, there's a lot of negative connotations to this thing. So it doesn't seem like it's going to just fall off a cliff. I mean, they might go one season and decide that this might not be worth it, but I think they're invested for a few seasons here, and they got major networks that are involved. So none of these games are being played at the same time, so you're able to watch all 4 games every weekend. There's 2 on Saturdays, 2 on Sundays. It's a 10-week season. Most of these games are in the afternoon at 2 and 5 o'clock. There's a few primetime ones that are thrown in here, like at 7, 8, or 9. They actually have a Thursday night game somewhere in here, too, toward the end of the season. And they're all on, like, ABC, Fox, and then ESPN or Fox Sports 1 as well. And I think there's, like, 1 or 2 that might be on Fox Sports 2. But for the most part, these are very accessible games to watch. They're available even, for cord cutters and things of that nature. So you don't have to, like, sign up or have some like crazy TV package in order to have these on your TV. You could, now you could take it with your phone and tablet and everything else. So I think that'll be kind of cool. And as much as I did like the AAF, the concept of it, I thought the pacing of the games were good. I thought some of the ideas were genuine and fresh. I am kind of glad it kind of went to the wayside, so they weren't competing this year with the XFL for the same pool of players. So the XFL should have, like, and with some of these things we're going to talk about and some of the people involved, this should be a pretty good upstart league. I mean, I know some people are probably rolling their eyes over there and they're like, oh, XFL, what does that even stand for? And you know what? They don't even know. I think legally they weren't allowed to say it was Extreme Football League because there was like some arena league or something that had that trademark and maybe still does. So They had actually, like, tongue in cheek, they said Extra Fun League instead of the Not Fun League or whatever, no Fun League. The NFL was up until they allowed celebrations and expression with the fancy shoes and stuff. But I don't know. What do you think, Zach? Are you looking forward to like some bonus football here? We got I know some people are waiting for pitchers and catchers to report, but even for that, I mean, that's just spring training. And I mean, baseball, geez, you could catch that, that lasts like 13 months out of the year.
I'm a football guy. So obviously, like any opportunity I have to have some sort of football, I don't care if it's college, NFL, high school, XFL. I mean, that's why I look forward to the AAF. It was just an extra opportunity to get some, bonus football. And I think I'm hoping that McMahon and, hopefully with the addition of Oliver Luck as the commissioner will hopefully help them rectify the mistakes that took place in 2001, because that was a colossal mishap, failure of the league in 2001.
Well,
I I think them treating this as a league, as an actual football league instead of like one of the extreme football league where it's over the top everything, I think will be a nice benefit. And I think the fact they have higher profile players in the league this time around too compared to last time, I think it's going to help them out beneficially as well, which I know we'll get to shortly. But I just think realistically having higher profile players, a more structured league, having more media attention, having more of the kind of football lust that we kind of seek for when we're in that Super Bowl hangover every single year, is definitely going to help a lot. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it can come to. I'm hoping it lasts longer than the AAF because the AAF kind of wore thin on me. I was really excited for it, then I kind of got bored of it after about 2-3 weeks. Obviously it became a failure in and of itself. So hopefully the XFL has a different type of route to that point, because I think there's a good opportunity here for this to be like a smaller condensed league. And we saw even just in that small window of the AAF in its existence, we saw a lot of those guys get another opportunity in the NFL. The amount of star power, and I'm using that term loosely, but former star power that's in this league could be another opportunity for these guys to make the jump back up into the NFL and see if they can, handle a second go around or even their first chance to get their feet wet if they go undrafted out of college. So, I'm excited to see if this can hold water a little bit more and if they can learn from the mistakes they made back in 2001.
Oh yeah, I mean the AAF, and contrary to the original XFL, I think the 30 for 30, they had like 8 weeks where they threw this together. It was like an idea they had, and instead of the equivalent of this same failure from 2001 would have been if they would have ran the XFL last year. And of course, the AAF, I think the main reason why I'm going to say I got bored with it, one was unfortunately there were some injuries. I was following the Birmingham Iron supposedly had, some links with some Steelers or some guys, some of the same names we're going to be talking about today too. But Tim Lewis was coaching there. He's a former defensive coordinator and an assistant underneath Bill Cowher for several years in Pittsburgh. And, he had Steve Spurrier, and that Orlando team was a pretty good offense. And he, in fact, was it Garrett Gilbert got a second chance at life there with an NFL career, and he hung on with the Browns this year as a backup. And, you have Mike Riley and Mike Martz and Mike Singletary and stuff like that. And those were the guys in the Alliance. And, I think the biggest problem with the Alliance for me was I couldn't figure out where to find the games. It was supposed to be this online platform, and instead when you went on, they had an app, it had this really weird fantasy football real-time the thing that sucked. It was you could see it almost looked like the electric football where the guys go zzz, and they move around on the board. That's what it looked like on the tablet, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I'd like to watch the game. And eventually when you did or were able to figure it out, depending, they weren't supposed to have blackouts, and there were still games you couldn't watch for whatever reason. And that was kind of a mess too. They were also worked really hard on that league there was a 4-second delay between, I guess, real time and whatever was streaming, which was really nice because, oftentimes if I'm watching, let's say I'm a cord cutter and I'm watching a game that's Monday Night Football on ESPN, I have to put my phone away, especially you guys in the back rooms or anybody on Twitter will spoil it for me immediately, especially if they're in the stadium. They're 2 plays ahead of whatever's streaming. So I'm hoping that, they have a lot of the same advances here. I mean, we haven't really heard a whole lot about that, but we have heard about some of these coaches. Bob Stoops, legendary coach from Oklahoma, and I wonder how they lured some of these guys out. Maybe because it's a shorter season. Maybe it was a decent payday. I don't know. I wouldn't say necessarily nicer weather. It's not like every single team is in a warm weather climate. I mean, you got a team in Washington D.C., you got a team in New York, so they went more for markets than they did. The AAF was almost all southern United States areas. You know what I mean? So we'll see. I mean, Jim Zorn, people should remember him, or Pep Hamilton, Mark Trestman, who's been everywhere, NFL, CFL, everything else. Kevin Gilbride is another name, linked with the Steelers, a former offensive coordinator there. Former tight end of the Steelers, Jonathan Hayes is a head coach. Winston Moss, June Jones. You have some coordinators that are interesting, like Norm Chow. So, I mean, this is going to be pretty neat, and we're going to get into some of these names that some people may remember from either transactions the Steelers made or training camps passed. Mostly guys that were practice squad guys, but I wouldn't necessarily dismiss some of the talent. I mean, Cam Kelly came out of nowhere, was a training camp phenom this year, but he had played, I think, for San Diego maybe in the AAF. So
San Diego. So.
Yeah, so I mean, you may even find that this may even lead to a situation where you have, I don't know, an XFL, NFL draft, some type of supplemental draft where some of these guys may. It depends on how successful it is. You know what I mean? I know some people are like, oh, well, they're automatically thinking, well, if this is successful, the NFL will invest money. If the NFL were interested in that, they would have put money into like Arena. They would have put money into the Canadian Football League, or they would do one of these innovations that the XFL is doing that we'll talk about as well. So I guess the biggest innovations are the rules here, and I guess the games. This was the thing for me with the Alliance football, and this may even be even better what the XFL was. They're trying to not make the games too long. I get it. You know what I mean? It's tough to invest 3.5, 4 hours, especially into like a minor league type of deal. And also for these networks, I don't think they want to invest much more than a block of like a couple of hours, 2 hours maximum for these games either. Because I mean, this TV time is very valuable, whether it be for advertising or whatever else. But you're in a dead period, and you know there's really only one network carrying hockey. And we're going to tell some of these folks that are Pittsburgh Steelers fans who you know you may want to follow. There's no team in Pittsburgh, but maybe you're a displaced fan somewhere else around the country, and you could catch one of these games, and you followed some of these players, and you're going to want to check it out. So I guess maybe we should start with the rules. So that would be, you know, maybe the biggest thing here. And they start off by saying that there's 5 gameplay innovations, 5 timing changes, and 5 common sense rules. And I think some of these, Zach, as we go through them, are basically not only designed for the pace of the game in order to fit into that TV window, but I think that it's designed also to hide deficiencies. So, but, you know, extra points, for example, are out the window. I think that's because there's just not enough good kickers.
Not enough good kickers in the NFL, let alone in the XFL.
Yeah, and the same thing with like wide receivers. You got 1 foot inbounds instead of 2 feet down. And, you know, we're going to cover some of these. And I think it's just to hide some deficiencies when it comes to some of these players. I mean, these guys are, you know, maybe above. It's hard to say above college football even, because, you know, there's some guys that are going to leave the NFL and they're done. They're not going to want to play in some like secondary league. Then there's other guys that we'll mention a couple of names here that are still hanging around, and I'm like, this guy's still playing football and he's playing in the XFL. Although I didn't see Wesley Saunders out there. Maybe he had a tryout or something, but I know he's still been trying to. Why not West? You know what I mean? So, yeah. But I guess one of these interesting ones is there's the kickoff rule. I don't even know that I want to explain this on the show, because it's very hard to explain how they're doing this differently. What they're, aside from the, you know, or I would say a contrast to the original XFL, this is player safety. What are they lining the guys up like on like they're 10 yards apart from the 30? The coverage team lines up on to return on the 35-yard line. Return team is on the 30. And then they must have exactly 3 players outside the hash marks on both sides of the ball. And there's different things with like the touchback and thing like that. But the kick must be in the air and in play, you know, between the 20s or whatever. And the only players that can move until it's touched by the returner or 3 seconds after the ball touches the ground when the official waves his hand down. I was wondering how they were going to signal this. Is then everybody can go, and it's basically almost like a bigger, what do you want to say, gap, like a line of scrimmage, a wider line of scrimmage, stretched out the width of the field maybe, in between everyone. And I guess the concept is to allow you know, shorter fields, which should allow more scoring. Obviously, if you're looking at this from, you know, the percentages and everything like that, the analytics, I think that's the idea, and to kind of take what has become a dull point in the NFL and make it exciting again.
Yeah, I think they're trying to make it so like these kickoffs actually can be exciting. I know the AAF kind of just took the kickoffs out, and they were just like, we're not going to do this. And I know there's been a lot of controversy in how the NFL goes and conducts their kickoff rules by changing where you kick the ball off, you know, almost encouraging touchbacks to try to promote player safety. But I think special teams has been such a crucial part of football as we've known it for so long. And, you see what one good return for a team can do. I mean, every single game, every single week, there's always one special teams play that just seems to sway the momentum of a game. I think this role, one, is promoting or encouraging teams to return the kicks and actually try to do something with it. And I think the tweak of having the players stand 5 yards apart from each other and not be able to move until the ball is in the air, I think is kind of a different tweak, because I know that is also promoting player safety to an extent, because so often when you're running a kickoff team and you're trying to be the kick return guy, you're just standing there wearing it, because those guys are coming in a full-on sprint down the field and they're just wrecking balls, looking to get in the way of anybody. I think by taking that away, you're promoting player safety, whether you look at it that way or not, while also trying to make it more exciting to see these guys actually have the opportunity to bust one of these plays wide open and run down the field. So I'm interested to see how this works out. It was a concept that I never really thought about. In my mind, I've always seen kickoff and kickoff return being such a big collision play. I never thought about just having the guys stand there pretty much like colonial soldiers waiting for the other side. So it's kind of it's a weird thing in my mind, but I get it. I'm excited to see how it works out. I think this role, and as well as some of the other roles, are going to be something that if they work out well, I wouldn't be surprised for the NFL almost stealing some of them. I don't know if this will ever be adapted, but especially just looking at the kickoff and kickoff return, how much that has been criticized by the NFL and trying to tweak ways to make it better and more exciting while also promoting player safety. If this works for the league, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they try to adapt something similar to that for the NFL. But I'm excited to see how this works out for them, honestly.
Did you happen to see there's no surprise onside kick? So people are probably wondering, well, how do you do an onside kick this way? Well, you don't. Then they just kind of line up traditionally, and you have to kick an onside kick, I imagine, or it's a penalty. So, they won't be able to do a surprise regular kick off of that. So they've had some of this thought through, whatever other minds besides just Oliver Luck. They've thought some of this through. No extra points. What they're going to do is like they're going to have a play, offense versus defense, from either the 2-yard line, 5-yard line, or 10-yard line, and they're worth 1, 2, or 3 points. Part of this is what they're trying to do. There's no kicking at all, so you can't kick an extra point. What they're trying to do is they're trying to not have overtime. Again, fitting in the TV window, which is kind of neat. And if the defense gets a turnover and they take it to the house, it's worth whatever the points were that the other team was attempting. So I do think that they should switch that around, maybe, because wouldn't it be a longer return if it was like a 2 or 10? If they're going from the 10. I think there's more of a chance you would turn the ball over, right? I don't know. But that's the one thing I was thinking of. Punting has changed too, and I don't know if I want to get into all of this. This is about like where everybody like lines up and stuff like that. There's like this thing called a major touchback too, where the ball goes to like the 35-yard line, which I thought was kind of crazy. There's still the fair catches are permitted, though disincentivized. So I don't know exactly, what some of this stuff. It says the XFL touchback changes will create less incentive for teams to punt in an opponent's territory. So they're trying to encourage scoring, which scoring is exciting, right? Of course. In NFL and college, touchbacks go to the 20, so teams will risk less versus the XFL on punts. Our coaches will be incentivized to go for it on 4th down because there's a higher likelihood of a positive punt return and no ability to pin the receiving team with a coffin corner kick. In fact, if they tried coffin corner, and I think it was inside the 20s, if it goes out of bounds, it goes to the 35 as a major, quote, major touchback. And then the other rule here is the double forward pass, which it's basically now, instead of them having to worry about, the lateral, the backwards pass, is it behind the line of scrimmage, in order to do kind of the flea flicker type thing, they're permitted to throw a second forward pass as long as the ball has at no time crossed the line of scrimmage. So I'm curious to see if teams will even attempt to use that. I still think that'll be more of a gadget play and seldom used. But I do kind of like, I don't know that I would like the punt rule for the NFL. I'm not even sure so much about like the point after type thing at this point. But again, for a team that, I hate saying lesser talent, but it is what it is. These aren't guys in the NFL getting paid Big Ben money. You know what I mean? So, you got to do something to make this exciting to have a product that people want to watch on TV.
Honestly, I'm not really surprised by these moves either. I mean, if you look at the coaches that are hired in this, 7 of the 8 of them are former offensive guys, like they're offensive minded guys. Winston Moss for the LA Wildcats is the only guy that has any type of really true defensive minded background. I think that kind of indicates where they wanted this league to go in terms of offensive output. I think these rules changes that are making it so they're encouraging fourth down production. They're encouraging big plays on special teams. They're encouraging for teams to go for a 3-point conversion on a touchdown to make it a higher scoring game. I think that's kind of indicative to that. I don't think those type of changes are going to be the things that get adapted by the league, if they ever would be. Because I think as much as the NFL loves being an offensive-minded league, there's still a very good place for defense in the hearts of fans. So I think a lot of these changes are to just promote higher scoring games, or at least to make the games seem more interesting, since there is a chance they are in a smaller window due to some of these rule changes. So I think a lot of that has to do with just trying to make it more exciting for fans than just seeing a shortened game where the final score ends up being 14-10. There's really no excitement in that. Fans like seeing the high points, the explosive offenses going down the field, big play opportunities, and massive fourth down conversions. So that's my take on it. I think that's realistically where this is going to end up. I think it's a smart move for them because the AAF got dry a lot of times, and the last thing the XFL wants to do for a league that originally was founded in 2001 as the Extreme League, they want to make it so it's at least somewhat entertaining for fans that are looking for some sort of excitement during the offseason. And because some of these guys are relevant and these coaches are former, relevant guys, it's a cool opportunity to get some explosive offensive output here. So that's really why I think the main point of it is. I don't see the league ever trying to accommodate to that. But for the XFL, I think it works, at least in my mind right now, before actually seeing anything on the field.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it translates. If they do overtime and they get to that point, which, it's set up so it can be that way. It's the 1-2 and the 3-point type deal. And some of these other rules are actually set up so they can tie up the game or, make these games a little closer instead of being, maybe 2-3 possession gaps, which also kind of makes it not so exciting too when one team really gets out in a lead and can sit on it. They're doing like, the NHL shootout or the Major League Soccer or, FIFA penalty kick situation where there's 5 rounds of single play possessions and they're from the 5-yard line with 1 play to score. So basically, if you score, it's worth 2 points. So like it's just like a 2-point conversion, but from the 5-yard line. If the defense happens to force a turnover, it's dead immediately. And it's one of those things where if one team scores 3 times, and the other one doesn't score in the first 3 and they're shut down, the game's over immediately like that. I think that's really cool. That's something that maybe the NFL might be like, that might be a decent idea. And I know that's going to be a whole collective bargaining players union type thing too, because it's a lot different being out there. But what's the difference? I would rather not have guys go out there for. I know they shortened it. What did it go down to 12 minutes this year? From what was that?
I believe, yes.
Yeah, from 15. And that was like the player safety because you're putting in all these extra plays and everything like this. All they're saying here is that this is a maximum of 5. Unless you're tied, then you go 1 for 1 until somebody wins. That's all the more wear and tear you're going to put on your body. I think it's some end without having the defensive turnover thing, it's dead. You don't have to risk injury by people, chasing people or linemen trying to tackle anybody. And I think that's pretty cool too. The other big ones are the timing changes, Zach. There's the 25-second play clock. I wanted to get up to, let me see. This is the one that's a little difficult to explain too. There's what's called a comeback period, and this kind of goes with the overtime thing too, where after the 2-minute warning in each half, on plays that end in the field of play, the game clock will be stopped until the ball has been spotted and 5 seconds have run off of the play clock. So if there's 5 seconds off of the play clock, now people just can't you have a game like the Super Bowl, for example, and there's a minute something left and the other team doesn't have any timeouts, you actually have to work in order to maintain that victory there, because it's just going to keep going. This clock's going to keep going, and then it's going to stop when you're in this comeback period at the end of each half, the final 2 minutes of each half. So that's kind of neat. And then I'm trying to read this one on the up-tempo game clock too. This was something that, so it's outside of those 2 minutes of each half. When a play ends out of bounds or on an incompletion, the game clock will be stopped until the ball's spotted. And then aside from incompletions of out-of-bounds plays, game clock rules outside the last 2 minutes of each half are the same as the NFL. So basically what they're saying is, as soon as the ball is spotted, there's not a 40-second play clock. It's 25 seconds. The ball gets spotted, we're going. And coaches in this comeback period, the last 2 minutes of each half, they're not going to have to be forced to use their timeouts either.
Yeah, which I think for me, like the clock change, that's always been something that's bothered me, because I feel like that's why a lot of these games at the end of the first half or second half, where you're within the 2 minute warning type of period of frame, you're sitting there. That 2 minutes seems like it lasts longer than the previous 28 minutes. So I think in my mind that kind of speeds up the process a little bit, makes it a little bit shorter, and allows coaches or forces coaches to kind of think more on their toes and have a set structured plan of how they want to go there. I'm going back to the overtime rules as well. I mean, you look at high school and college football, a lot of times that kind of shootout type frame has been more productive, because like you said, it takes the wear and tear off the bodies and makes it so the players can go out there and just try to play one play or three plays, whatever, because normally it's like a 4-down situation, but just boom, 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 get it over, and then you're done. I think that's a much more exciting way too. That's why I love shootouts in hockey. Yeah. It's much more breathtaking to see that happen, because one play makes the difference. And that's, again, going back to relating how the NFL does it. The overtime rules in the NFL are still criticized, even though they've done better to try to fix them. They're still very criticized, and I think that's something that does need to change at some point, because we've seen these other leagues have success with the way they do their overtimes. Why is it that the NFL seems to still not get it right? The timing thing, for the clock, looking at the timeout changes, I know the one thing that really stood out to me as well was looking at instant replay changes, how they're all going to be 60 seconds and then done. So there's none of this whole did Jesse catch it situation. We're sitting there waiting for 10 minutes, waiting for New York to make a decision. So I think those type of things to help speed the process up, not only speed the process up, but also just make the game black and hopefully more black and white, move forward with it, and just be able to make these snap decisions that are kind of just live with it and go with it type of deals. So, I think moving that clock along in the 2 minute warning period of time is very, very productive for the teams. I know I heard tweaks about changing with the placement clock, like how long it takes for the refs to go and place the ball and they'll run off with that. These are all small things that will help just keep the game, again, more fast-paced, more exciting, to make it more enjoyable to watch, while also, reducing the frame of time in which it actually is taking place in real time on a clock. So,
yeah, and you know what else? It's pretty important, the whole timing thing here. The coaches, they only get 2 1-minute timeouts per half instead of 3 timeouts. So they took a timeout away, but they gave them more opportunities to have the clock stopped. And I think that's pretty neat in and of itself. And as you mentioned with the replay stuff, there's no coaches' challenges at all. And there's only reviewable plays by it's a replay official. It's like a sky judge. And they have certain amounts of what the reviewable plays are limited to. And, I don't want to bore people with all of that stuff when it comes to the XFL changes. But their rationale is that football officiating is paramount to how fans view the game. To get the play right is of utmost importance to the XFL. And their goal is to provide quality reviews at the right times and in a timely fashion. By eliminating coaches' challenges, we don't rely on the teams to fix miscues by the officials. And by only allowing common sense to be applied to officiating, we put the fan first instead of the process. Here's those common sense rules, by the way. We mentioned the 1 foot inbounds. There's a dedicated ball spotting official. So instead, NFL and college, they only have 7 referees, and there's no single official responsible for spotting the ball. So their idea is when you're cycling in a new ball and everything like that, they say it takes as much as 12 seconds, depending on the situation. So this is getting it standardized for the time it takes to spot the ball, and that's going to be important too because of the time running off and those comeback periods and stuff. This is going to be interesting. I know they've had a little bit. It's not been televised, but they've had some preseason. They've had some scrimmage games. So hopefully we'll see how the officiating is too, because these guys are, kind of backups or lesser talent as well. There's some different stuff when it comes to coach to player helmet type stuff. I'm not going to get into that either. If you want to read this, it's on the rules. There's a simplified illegal man downfield. It says no ineligible players shall be or have been more than 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage until a passer throws a legal forward pass that crosses the line of scrimmage. A player is in violation of this rule if any part of his body is beyond a 3-yard limit. So I know you're a lineman. I'm curious to see what you think about that, because the only other one to mention here is the shorter halftime. They go to 10 minutes instead of 15. Again, I think that's a TV time frame type deal.
I mean, lineman going downfield has always been a ticky-tack thing anyway, because I've been called personally in my career of being downfield. When I look at the line of scrimmage, look where the sticks are, and I'm literally 1 foot over the line, and somehow that turns into me. The ref's like, "Oh, you were 6 yards down the field, son," and I'm okay. I'm just I'm indifferent, honestly. I think a lot of the rules that are put in place for line play are so poorly enforced to begin with. You could look at any play in any league at any level and find a holding, find a false start, find a illegal hands to the face, find block in the back, a legal man downfield. You can pinpoint anything. So I don't waste a lot of time in my mind getting involved in a lot of the offensive line calls, because until they become too overly called, we're seeing players being called for just blatant, just nitpicking. I'm not going to overly concern myself with a lot of the line calls. That's just my stick.
You didn't want the ball. You didn't want the ball thrown to you like Zach Banner wanted Duck Hodges to throw.
I played fullback once upon a time in a run first offense. So I know those days went very very quickly to the wayside. So as much as I would love to be an eligible receiver, I know my place in this world. It's fine.
Know your role, man. Well, you know what? It's time. There's some guys that may have some roles here, and part of the reason, we went with this topic, we kind of wanted to set up half of this show to talk about the XFL being different and complain about a McDouble being a McSingle. But the other half of this is there's some former Steelers involved in the league. Now, I have to put this rubber stamp on this. Everyone heard my spiel about YouTube and haters of our site, just the other day. And I got to say, this will be on the website if you want to view it with your own eyes on Friday morning. There'll be all of the I called it, I think, a comprehensive list of former Steelers that are in the XFL now. What is it to be a Steeler? You were signed for 5 days and then go on IR, get released with an injury settlement. If there was some transaction or interaction with the team, we're kind of using that a little loosely. Some guys, maybe a little more than a cup of coffee with the team, and then others, they didn't even get a Keurig single K cup. They didn't even get the machine loaded, and they were out of the building. But hey, you know what? This is for fun, and you may remember some of these names too. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring it up, and I just want to let you know that this was when I compiled this list myself. Zach, you looked at it some. Also, Derek Overly, one of our contributors over on the website. I got to thank him for some of his help with this too. We put some of this together because, especially me and Derek, we've been kind of fanboying over this XFL thing and excited to see some games too. And anytime you looked somewhere else, whether it was like another Steelers site or somebody else, they had it wrong. Like, there's guys that are listed as playing for certain teams. The XFL had cuts, folks. You had to make the team for the XFL. Just because you're like kind of in the pool didn't mean that you get to swim. So they have 52-man rosters, which will actually expand. I think they go up to like 57, 58, something like that later in the year. We'll mention that too here shortly. But the headliner, of course, why else would I be excited? Well, he's still hurt. He got hurt in January, out 4 to 6 weeks. I'm not sure of the diagnosis, but I don't think he's playing this weekend. But it's the GOAT. It's Landry Jones, man. He's even wearing a GOAT number in this league. He's playing for the Dallas Renegades. So these are all the guys with the Dallas Renegades, by the way. But Landry Jones, former backup for the Steelers, one of the more high-profile names on this Dallas team that has links to the Steelers. He's with his former college coach, Bob Stoops. And he's, like I said, he's wearing number 12. That's the TB number. Terry Bradshaw and, that other guy in New England we don't talk about. So, well, it'll be interesting to see if and when he gets on the field. And then you have a defensive end in Winston Craig, a linebacker in Tigray Scales that I know both of us were excited to have him in camp last year. And then a corner in Deshaun Phillips, who you may or may not remember, but there was like this little trade a few years ago in the offseason, and he came over from the Redskins. But he actually played. He has NFL playing experience, Craig was with the Birmingham Iron last year, and then Scales was the guy that was trying to come back from an injury. Otherwise, he may have been like drafted. He went undrafted, didn't he? Yeah, completely undrafted. He would have been a draftable guy for sure.
Yeah, no, I think of all the teams here that are in this league, I think the Renegades have one of the more interesting talent pools. Them and the Defenders, we'll get to there shortly. I just think, look at the Renegades, obviously Landry Jones being the inaugural player of all people to be the inaugural player. It's Landry Jones. I know that makes you warm and fuzzy inside. I think that kind of is an interesting take. I think it kind of shows the fact that he does still have value from teams, and I think the reports of the Steelers wanting to sign him back in the XFL, blocking him after Ben went down earlier in the season is indicative of how they want to make him like the dude.
Well, yeah, he was the first guy ever to sign with the XFL, which is strange because they had the $1 million game or whatever was the championship game for the lone season of the XFL from the 2001 league, and then that was Tommy Maddox. And then he became an NFL Comeback Player of the Year with the Steelers. So it's a very weird link there. Same position, basically the same league and everything like that. So yeah, they kind of try to make him, I guess, the poster boy. Aside from the high profile coaches, I guess. Maybe you'll get some people. And the other thing is, he's in Dallas. Stoops is in Dallas. There's definitely Oklahoma fans that are in that Texas area. There, you're about an hour from the Oklahoma state line, depending on where you're at in the Dallas metro area, maybe less. So this is smart. And for me, I'm going to follow Dallas just because they're called the Renegades. I think there's a link there.
You're not wrong. I mean, that's not their song. I'm not sure that they're doing it wrong. I mean, I don't think any Steelers fans would be upset if they played Renegade in the fourth quarter of a comeback game and week 3 of a game that I don't know what it is, but I think it would be a nice little twist for them. I think they're interesting. Obviously, Scales, I was a big fan of. I was excited whenever. He was, the Steelers brought him on. I know obviously Noah Freeman is much more akin to him being an Indiana guy, but I think Scales is a name that you'll see if he can produce here. I think he'll get picked up again. He has the athletic profile for it. I was really kind of surprised he didn't stick around after the Steelers let him go. Having been with the Rams and the Steelers, I thought there would be a place for him in the league, but evidently not. But I'm interested to see where he kind of lands and see if he can go from being an obscure late round pick, kind of floated around a person who can make a second comeback tour here in the league.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to think if I should say anything else about Dallas. I'm just going to stick with the Steeler guys, and that's pretty much the ones that we kind of picked out here. So let me see. I'm going to jump down to the DC Defenders. Here's another high-profile guy, I guess, Eli Rogers, and he's still wearing the long-sleeve T-shirts underneath, the jerseys. I see some of the practice images and stuff that they've had up on the XFL website. There's also Duran Grant and Shamarko Thomas, two guys that were, brought in hopefully be some type of saviors or patchwork or whatever for the Steelers secondary over the years that ultimately didn't work out. You may remember Shamarko as the guy who had to fill or was trying to fill Troy Polamalu's shoes when he retired. And yeah, that didn't work out. Oh, it's so hot. We had an asterisk next to one too with Tyler Palka. He kind of had a flirtation with the Steelers. He wasn't ever officially signed, but I wanted to put him on this list because nobody else was doing this. They didn't pick up on him. Saginaw Valley State standout. He ended up going from being a quarterback there to a wide receiver at Gannon, and I think most folks that are in Western Pennsylvania recognize Gannon as being in Erie, Pennsylvania. So he had his senior season in 2017. He had a big standout year there. He may have even been like kind of one of these local guys that they could invite very easily to like a rookie mini camp. He was invited to that, and that was about as far as it went. But here he is, and I have him listed as quarter. I think they have him listed, or did they have him listed as a? Now I got to go look. I think they do have him listed as a wide receiver because that's where that's where he cut his teeth, man. So I mean. Yeah, he's a receiver and wearing 16. Oh, the other Zach would be all over that, man. That's kind of, can you wear 16 as a receiver? I've seen guys with 17. 16 is still a quarterback number in the NFL, right?
Seems like it's predominantly quarterbacks. Like, I don't know if there's any receivers off the top of my head that have wore 16. I mean, it's legal to do it. Seems like it's probably been a quarterback number.
Yeah, I mean, and like in college, you have, a lot of the single digit, well, you get guys that play defense that wear single digits too, but, or you have a number that's used on both sides if you have a very large roster like Alabama or Ohio State. But, yeah, I mean, Duran Grant, you probably remember him for a pick six in the preseason. He came from Ohio State. Pains me to say that's all the further he really went. He was a 4th round pick, as was Shamarko. Eli Rogers was undrafted, and, there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not he could make a comeback or whatever else. We'll see. I know the Steelers, for whatever reason, they moved on. They probably felt they had multiple players like Deontay Johnson, or even, I know some people will be like, yeah, right, but Ryan Switzer that fill that same kind of mold. And I know the Ravens were sniffing around and gave Rodgers some tryouts here or there. It just nothing really materialized. Speaking of former high-profile wide receivers, unless you had something else to throw in for the DC team, I don't have a whole lot on them. No. Houston, yeah, I know, man. We're already stop it. the Houston Roughnecks, and they have Sammy Coates, the guy who went from like 5 straight weeks of 40+ yard touchdown receptions to not being able to catch a cold because he smashed up those fingers in the biggest game he had in his NFL career against the Jets the one year in like week 5. And so he'll be there in Houston. I know all these guys, they went through a draft. They actually did drafting by skill positions. They didn't do like everybody all at once. They did quarterbacks all by themselves. I think they did receivers and running backs by themselves, and maybe even tight ends, and then offensive linemen on their own, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's strange to me to see, Sammy was last with the Texans? So it's kind of weird. I wonder if he had like a residence there or whatever. But offensive lineman Kelvin Palmer, very short term with the Steelers. Kashad Lyons and Johnny Maxey were both practice squad guys. And Maxey actually got, due to injuries, he made it to the 53-man roster at the end of the 1 year. What did I have here? Blah, 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 blah. I think that was 2016, I believe. Yeah, he got called up on Christmas Eve of 2016. So he played 2 games, and then he was inactive for that playoff game against the Dolphins and further on, I think, against the Chiefs and the Patriots. But hey, he was on the roster. He was there for the ride. So you know what? Actually, he may have even been released before that. But I digress. That's not that important of a detail. But hey, former Steelers, some of them more than others.
Yeah, no, Sammy Coates and Eli Rogers are 2 dudes. I think Eli Rogers uses this as an opportunity to parlay himself up with DC. But I think Sammy Coates is a guy where if he doesn't have that finger injury, I still think he's in the league. I feel he might even still be with Pittsburgh. Because quite frankly, you couldn't deny his athletic traits before the finger injury. I mean, he was showing so much promise there. And, fans can belittle that all you want to. Finger injuries as a receiver are so crucial. I mean, I still am going to stand by the fact that still what ended up dooming Dante Moncrief whenever he was in Pittsburgh last year. You see some of these gruesome finger injuries, and they never really seem to go back to the regular, even if they do get surgery on them. So I'm not surprised that his career went the way that it did. I'm interested to see if he can kind of make a splash this year with Houston. I liked Sammy Coates coming out. I actually really liked the pick when they drafted him. I liked what he was able to do before his finger injury. But I think a guy like him and Johnny Maxey seemed to be lingering around forever in Pittsburgh. He always seemed to be the name that was on the preseason roster on that defensive line depth chart. So, it's nice to see him get an opportunity here as well. But Sammy Coates is one person I am actually anxious to see if he can kind of rectify it and take this opportunity to prove himself, because the athletic traits are all there. The physical traits are all there. It's just a matter of, is he healthy enough to physically catch the football, which is, maybe a little important part as a receiver. I don't know. But
we remember when we thought because his fingers had the bend that he may be able to catch better. Yeah, and it just didn't work out. It's the same thing like with Dante Moncrief. I think once that happens, I think there's a mental aspect to it that really screws with you too. It sucks. I mean, what else can you do? It is what it is, and it's unfortunate because they're injuries that are pretty much out of your control. The Los Angeles Wildcats, DeJuan Harris, a running back, and then you have a defensive back, or SAF, and Jack Tocho. We're excited about Jack Tocho, right? I mean, This is a guy, he was another Alliance of American Football guy from last year.
Yeah, I was a big fan of him. I really thought I didn't think he was going to stick around, but I was excited by the signing because I thought he was a better player than given credit for. He was very much the box safety type, big hitter, decent hands. He didn't really have a chance of making the roster, especially whenever Cam Kelly kind of stepped up and started doing what he was doing before he got into his little legal trouble there. I think realistically, Tocho never really had a chance, but I think he has a place for a team that's looking for a box defender. This will be a good spotlight for him. He did well in the AAF. I think he'll do well here as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of almost like Cam Kelly kind of took us more by surprise than Tocho. We thought Tocho was going to be the guy initially. So moving ahead, New York Guardians, and I'm going back to Jack Tocho for a second. SAF. It's interesting that the way they designated that. Zach, versus just some guys are listed as cornerback, some guys are just listed as a safety with a single S. Tocho's an SAF. He's not even like a DB. It's weird. I'm going to be interested to see like what kind of formations or designations they give some of these players, because they're official rosters, and I think the Wildcats are the only ones. They have multiple guys listed as SAF versus anything else with the other secondary or positions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I think that's indicative, realistically, of his kind of versatility, moving around, whatnot, kind of being a true safety, and not really a guy you're going to be willing to put outside. Because that was his biggest knock coming out. Whenever he's here, he's not an athletically gifted guy. If I'm not mistaken, he's like a 4.55, 4.6 guy. Which is why he kind of got knocked to being a pure safety, especially a box safety. You're not going to really rely upon coverage very much. So I think that's why they're just blatantly giving him that designation. Would be my assumption here.
Yeah, they're not like I don't know. It's kind of weird because you don't see anybody like with linebackers listed as like outside linebacker or inside linebacker on some of these rosters either. It's I don't know. It was just something that I picked up on there, and if you happen to see it on the list on the website, just that's the reason why. So I'm just going with what I'm given, and they have multiple guys that were listed as this. So I don't know. Anyways, I digress. New York Guardians, the Kevin Gilbride's team. Oh, all these coaches are also GMs too, man. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, they all are. They wear like both hats, so they're in charge of the team from every aspect, I guess, except for owning it. All the teams are owned by the league itself. So, center Garrett Brumfeld. There's a guy we were looking at this last offseason. A guy I was really high on, cornerback Jamar Summers, who lit it up in the Alliance of American Football last year, and I was hoping the Steelers were going to bring back and didn't. I mean, he really stood out to me. The previous training camp wasn't last year; it was the year before. a guy that you liked this year that you were happy about them picking up as an undrafted free agent, a safety, Drayvon Askew-Henry. And then who could forget a kicker, Matt McCrane, who the Steelers actually had under contract, but he didn't end up making it to camp this year. Everybody was like looking around to see what was going to happen with Chris Boswell. And if you remember, Chris Boswell sat out the final week of the 2018 season, and the Steelers, struggled to beat that Bengals team. And then they were looking on to see if the Browns could beat the Ravens to sneak into the playoffs. While they were struggling, Matt McCrane ends up kicking 3 field goals and an extra point, scoring 10 of their points in a 16-13 win to end what was a miserable year, and then all the Antonio Brown doesn't show up and all that other stuff. So who can forget Matt McCrane? What do you think about this lot of guys? This is like the second most when it comes to quote former Steelers of any of the XFL rosters, I believe.
Yeah, this has the feel of like the recency bias Pittsburgh Steelers, because like you have a guy like Brumfield who the Steelers liked him, and they brought him in for a pre-draft visit. He went undrafted. They had no problem bringing him in for a priority free agent signing. I know Jamar Summers is a guy that you liked, had a lot of flashes there, and I really was hopeful for him. And cornerback's just such a tough position to stick around in the league if you don't have that it factor. You kind of just pop like Mike Hilton being an undrafted guy who you knew from the get-go is like, this guy can play football. And then obviously Askew-Henry is a WPIL guy like I am, and having the opportunity to see him play whenever he was at Aliquippa, it was really a kind of nice feeling. I'll eventually one day get over that he snubbed Pitt with the WVU instead, but I digress. But I think these guys are young enough to make an impact now where they do well here. There's going to be an opportunity for them to really showcase their skills. All of them have redeemable traits as players. It's not that they don't. I mean, Brumfield is an LSU SEC mauler. I mean, the guy I thought was going to stick around on the practice squad, honestly, and he, didn't. But I think he has enough traits there. You don't start at LSU for as long as he did and then have the success that he did there without having some redeemable traits. And Summers is still a nice, fluid athlete, and Askew-Henry is a nice safety who, again, I think kind of got knocked down a little bit because of how Cam Kelly kind of emerged last preseason as the camp darling. I think or else he could have had a chance of sticking around a little bit longer than he did. There's a lot of those guys they brought in safety last year were just, tough competition. So I think this is a nice group of guys as well. McCrane, obviously, fans are quick to forget. People wanted to legitimately keep McCrane over Boswell before Boswell had a chance to prove himself as being healed and healthy. And I think at this point, I don't think a single person would ever want that again after seeing Boswell in 2019. So McCrane, again, is another symptom, going back to the whole kickers and how it seems like kicking is becoming a non-factor in this league. His biggest issue was leg strength. I mean, he was accurate. He knuckleballed the ball through there, but he doesn't have a tremendous leg when it comes to strength. I think that's going to be a thing you see very frequently with a lot of these kickers is kickers are so tough to find in the league. And now you're asking all 32 NFL teams to have a kicker and all these teams in the XFL to have a kicker. I mean, there's only so much to go around,
Yeah,
so,
and there's injuries with kickers too. I think some of it's nerves also. I mean, a lot of pressure at that position. It's like you either do well or you don't have a job next week. That's a reality for a lot of guys who don't. Let's face it. If Chris Boswell wouldn't have signed that big contract, he might not be a Steeler right now. He wouldn't have been there last season, I don't think. And, McCrane was, believe it or not, number 2 in Big 12 history and number 7 in NCAA history for career field goal percentage, which is that's very interesting. He may have even led, let's see, where did he go? Kansas State. He might be like the all-time leading scorer there, up there, as far as kickers, man. I mean, that's pretty wild. And you know what? One of these rosters doesn't even have a kicker on it. It was whoever. You may have seen Jeff Reed. He just tweeted it out the other day. It was Garrett Hartley, who you may remember. Well, you know what? I think he was going to be with. Well, we only have 2 other teams left. It's either the St. Louis Battlehawks or the Seattle Dragons. I'm going to go to the Battlehawks roster right here since we're kind of getting up against it. But and then I'll mention Hartley at the tail end too. But let's see, LaDamian Washington, wide receiver. This is one of the guys that got signed, and then he had like this crazy injury where I think like his calf muscle came right off the bone, and he ended, an off-season workouts. This was like OTAs or something, and this was like way back in. Let me see. Was it 2015, I believe? And so he had an injury settlement and he was gone. I think he's been grinding since like 2011 in the NFL. Kind of reminds you of like Johnny Holton. Casey Sales, he played in the AAF last year. Terrence Garvin, here's a guy. This is the guy that broke Kevin Huber's jaw, the punter for the Bengals. If you remember the one, was it a Sunday night game against the Bengals several years ago? Antonio Brown had a punt return for a touchdown, and they were criticizing the hit that Garvin, the block that he laid on Huber and broke his jaw. And of course, it would be Bengals fans that cry about something like that. But hey, this is why there's some of these different rules too that are going on. Jonathan Hayes, who we mentioned earlier, and then there's another coach. Jonathan Hayes is the head coach, but Tim Lewis is one of the defensive assistants, not the defensive coordinator, but he was also a guy, a Bill Cowher guy too. And I'm going to jump to Seattle real quick. Running back Trey Williams, tight end Cameron Clear. Those were both kind of, off-season training camp and or practice squad players off and on over the last few years with the Steelers. And then a linebacker, Steven Johnson, who was brought on from the Titans originally. He kind of hung on for, I think, a year. It was one of those things where he was on the roster bubble as a veteran player that they brought in just for some depth after the Ryan Shazier injury. This was back, 20... oh, no, I'm sorry. That wasn't the Ryan Shazier injury. They still had, I'm reading this completely wrong from my own notes. Lawrence Timmons, Ryan Shazier, Vince Williams were already on that depth chart. I believe they also just drafted like Tyler Matakevich or somebody in that lot. There was a lot of competition there, but that's when Bud Dupree got hurt. And what they ended up doing was they cut Johnson because you had to keep Dupree on the roster for the active 53 in order to make him eligible to be designated to return from injury reserve later in the year. So that's exactly what they did. Like the very first official business day, Bud Dupree went on IR, and then they re-signed Steven Johnson, and then he went over to the Ravens too right after that. So I was kind of like interested to, the guy was a former college walk-on, and he's still, he's out there grinding too. Went to the Ravens, then he played in the AAF as well for another team called the Hot Shots over in Arizona. So those are some interesting names there. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more team. I don't want to be like the article I read that left 2 of the 8 teams completely off. Imagine that. 16 league. Marcellus Branch, who was another local guy from Robert Morris. He's a safety. He's the only guy really with any ties with the Steelers, with the Tampa Bay Vipers.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see a guy like or guys like Terrence Garvin and Steven Johnson linger around. I mean, like especially Terrence Garvin. I mean, he was a very under the radar fixture here. I mean, he was a special teams stud by all counts, for everything he did there. And then he did the same thing with the Redskins there for a minute, So I think he, I'm not going to say he's going to use this as much as anything. So just an ability to keep his playing career going because he's kind of done his thing. But he was a nice athletic piece. He was a relatively smart player, and was always willing to put his nose in there. And he kind of fit the mold of what the Steelers look for from their backup linebackers in a special teams capacity. And I was kind of hoping to stand for Steven Johnson, but that kind of, the NFL is a business, and you have to kind of make business moves in terms of your more sought after players, which is in that case with Bud Dupree, who was at that point, a 2 or 3 year into the league, first round pick, so like he kind of had to ensure his safety on the team. So seeing some of these guys lingering around here as long as they've been in the league is nice to see if they're still looking for opportunities, even though the well is probably drying up sooner for them than it is for other guys on this list. But, just seeing them still lingering around, take the opportunities, it is nice. It's especially that's, I think, for the league, it has multiple purposes. It has the purpose of being able to let these guys continue their career or showcase their skills to hopefully jump back, and the league give them the opportunity. But I think from this perspective, for some of these players, sometimes playing football is enough, and they're just happy to have pads on and be in that environment. And, maybe they do get an opportunity in a special teams capacity down the road. You never know. Teams might see enough there and say, we need some depth from a veteran leader, and go for it, but you never know. But it'll be interesting to see how those guys, as older players, and they're not old, but older than a guy who was just an undrafted free agent in 2019. How they respond in this league and how they kind of use it as an opportunity to showcase their skills.
Experienced players, veteran players.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, and I mean, there were guys that didn't make a roster for one reason or another, some more surprising than others. We were just talking about Garrett Hartley as a kicker. Apparently he has an artificial disc, I guess, in his neck, and they were saying that he wasn't cleared. And I'm trying to think who Seattle. It was the Seattle Dragons, and they don't even have a kicker listed on their roster, so I don't know if they're trying to work through this or not. But Garrett Hartley had tweeted something out just recently, and Jeff Reed was even responding and saying how it was complete crap. You'll remember Hartley as the guy they brought in once Sean Swisham got hurt in the Hall of Fame game. And then he got hurt with 2 weeks into the preseason too, when they had the 5 preseason games. So it was very unfortunate. He actually, really hasn't done anything since, back then in 2015 or whatever. So, he's been trying to get back into the league, back into any league. Apparently, I mean that's quite a long time to not play, even if you're a kicker. And I don't know. I mean, what was that? Was that last year when I spoke with Jeff Reed? But he said, he could probably come out and kick for somebody right now. So I don't know. Maybe these guys, I guess that's what they got to do. They got to try and stay in shape in order, if somebody calls you, you're not just sitting on the couch eating Doritos. We'll talk about that in a second too. But Brogan Roback, he lost his spot to Duck Hodges when Duck Hodges came to the rookie minicamp. Otherwise, Roback, formerly of the Browns, the previous preseason, and he was kind of their camp arm there as well. You might remember him on Hard Knocks. He was actually signed to the Steelers in the offseason right around this period of time, and he didn't end up making it to camp. Damone Patterson was a preseason phenom, a camp phenom, and the Steelers didn't hold on to him. He was a Youngstown State guy, my alma mater, so that makes me sad. Another guy that had a lot of camp phenom hype was Matthew Thomas, and he actually got called up to the 53, former Florida State guy, went undrafted for maybe some off-field type things, question marks, whatever it be, his background, character, I don't know what it was, medical, whatever it may be. I don't get into those things, but he was quicker than a hiccup, and he was even playing gunner on special teams. I think he went over to the Ravens a little bit too, so he's still trying to, put some things on tape, maybe get back in the league, which is, what this is all about too, aside from entertaining us. And then finally, one of our former co-hosts here on the Steel City Underground podcast, Trey Johnson, he didn't hang on either, unfortunately. I was ready to have Trey back on too to discuss some XFL things. So we'll see, there may be injuries and other openings that may happen in this league. And one of the things that they've prepared for with this, rather than getting the guy eating Doritos off the couch, is something called Team 9. So there's 8 teams in the league. They have a Team 9 that's staffed with coaches and players, and it's an extra squad that's available to fill open roster spots on any team in the league at any time. So if one of these teams loses a safety in week 2, they could call up a football-ready replacement in time to face, their week 3 opponent, which is, very cool. So these guys have already been practicing. They started on the 2nd, I believe. So they operate just like an extra team, except they don't play games. And what's going to happen is at a certain point in the season, these teams are going to be required. I don't know if it's like a draft process or whatever, but they're going to have to pick up players from this team, and then they do a whole new Team 9. So they're going to expand the rosters later in the season, and I think that helps keep fresher bodies and stuff like that and give some guys more opportunities, which is really what the XFL is about, aside from, like I said, trying to entertain us as an extra football league while there's no other football being played.
Yeah, it's a nice little twist. I think it just helps to also keep the bodies flowing through the league, because you have to figure, even if this league does become a success and is around for more than a year, like it previously was the last go around, there's going to be guys that end up naturally leaving the teams that go and seek other opportunities. Either they just realize they don't want to do it anymore, they have an opportunity to go back into the NFL. So you have to keep bodies fresh in this league, and you have a lot of guys right now, they're just sitting on the couch. There's more guys probably sitting on their couch looking for an opportunity than there are guys that actually have the opportunity in front of them right now. So realistically, you want to have these guys constantly flowing through there to get different bodies, get different opportunities for these players to kind of show what they have and make the best of the opportunity. So I think it's a cool little twist they're doing there to keep it fresh and keep things moving.
Yeah, and it's somewhere, I can't even find where I found that on their website. They have news almost every day on here. Here it is. It was from January 31st when I saw it, and I'm trying to see here. Let me see. XFL Director of Scouting, Eric Galko, overseeing Team 9. They're based in Arlington, Texas. They share a lot of the same facilities with the Dallas Renegades, but they still function as a separate entity. So I think that's pretty interesting. Bart Andrus is coaching Team 9, and he's been everywhere. I mean, this guy was at NFL Europe. He's been in Canada. He's been in the NFL college, other spring leagues. I mean, if there's anybody to try and lead something like this and keep these guys' heads up, he's been there. He won one of these NFL Europe championships coaching Amsterdam back in 2005. It's wild. And I think it's cool too, because this opens up a lot of jobs and opportunities for a lot of people, even like himself. So this will be pretty interesting to see how the Team 9 thing operates. This was the other thing I was thinking, if the NFL didn't totally get on board with basically having like 32 teams linked to like farm clubs, they could add like a team 33 and team 34 for the AFC and NFC and pull some resources. And, even with the kicker tryouts or guys that they bring in like on like Mondays or Tuesdays, depending on how the week shakes out, they're always trying to get these guys, and these guys are just kind of sitting around. They have to work with personal trainers. They're not doing anything actual football wise. And this Team 9, they're using generic terminology, et cetera, to, keep these guys plugged in and glued in to the system. And I think that'll only help because as we know with the Steelers this past season, injuries are inevitable, and you could see how it might derail a team. They're fortunate enough that they're able to get someone like, I don't know, like Deion Kane or I don't want to say his name wrong again, Karen White. I mean, it's amazing that they were Kareth. Jeez, I still got it wrong. Stop it. Brian can make fun of me now for that. I got him with the Minka thing forever. So, and I keep butchering Mr. White's name. It's not Walter White, but anyways, it's just, you're lucky that those guys were on other teams' practice squads to be able to pluck them and plug them into a game as fast as they did and get them up to speed. Otherwise, you get stuck in a situation where, Ryan Shazier goes down and you have Sean Spence come back, who hadn't played football for about 3 months, and whatever shape or whatever he was in, aside from the fact that other teams didn't value him enough to be on an active roster or practice squad otherwise, depending on eligibility, of course. So I think this is a pretty cool thing. I know the NFL has like practice squads for those reasons. They should look into something like this. I mean, I know they don't want to expand rosters or practice squads, so then teams are hoarding talent. But at the same time, this is something that's kind of neat too, where everybody can kind of dip in and maybe get somebody. And it doesn't mean that they absolutely have to grab somebody from this team, but at some point their hands forced a little bit to add some of these guys, and then they'll bring in even more people, because then if they're not picked up off the Team 9, then they're just kind of stagnant and sitting there. So I like the concept. Zach, any closing thoughts here on the whole XFL kind of thing here, or anything you're looking forward to?
I'm just looking forward to football, Joe. I mean, I'm depressed with the fact that we now have to wait till August to get any sort of even semi-meaningful football from the NFL. So any type of anything that involves organized sports in the game of football, I don't really care what it is. I'm just hoping that this lasts a little bit longer and kind of goes to full fruition longer than the AAF did, and can at least turn into something that could be an annual thing that we can look forward to every year after the Super Bowl. So we're not just sitting there twiddling our thumbs until the draft and then ultimately until training camp opens up. So I'm just excited to have football in some capacity back for even a short window of time.
Oh, and you know what else I had forgotten? There's 2 guys on Team 9 that were with the Steelers, a cup of coffee with the Steelers, off-season, training camp, preseason guys, tight end Farrell McKeever, and Darnell Leslie, who is listed as a linebacker here, but was kind of a defensive end with the Steelers. And, always the kiss of death when you're wearing something like 49 and you're playing defense in the preseason. So, I believe he had even had maybe some time in the CFL as well. So, Once again, Zach, I know we're really up against it, man. We could talk forever about football, and this is like not even the NFL. So thanks for joining me once again today, man.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, plus complain to YouTube if you're listening from there. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Zach. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.